By 9 o'clock on a bright Monday morning, 33 secretaries had already learned that no one was safe inside the glass tower of Veyron Global. One after another, they had entered the CEO's office carrying resumes, confidence, and hope, and one after another, they had walked out carrying cardboard boxes. The 42nd floor had become known as the place where careers disappeared before lunch. But that morning, when a tired single father stepped into the same office with a worn leather folder under his arm, nobody expected him to last even a week. Least of all the CEO herself. She had fired 33 secretaries in less than 2 years, and the company had stopped trying to understand why. She was brilliant, wealthy, feared, and almost impossible to please. Yet the man standing before her did not look frightened. He looked exhausted. There was a tiny crayon mark on the sleeve of his inexpensive blue shirt, and in his pocket was a folded drawing made by his 6-year-old son. The CEO glanced at him, then at his resume, and coldly asked what made him think he could succeed where 33 others had failed. The man took a breath, looked directly at her, and quietly said, "Because I'm not here to manage your calendar. I'm here to make your life work. I'm the last secretary you'll need. If you believe that kindness, patience, and second chances can change a person's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. You never know when one small act of kindness might become the reason someone keeps going." His name was Calder Rowan, and unlike most applicants who entered Veyron Global dressed in expensive suits, Calder had arrived wearing the best clothes he could afford after paying his son's school fees and rent. He was 36, a single father, and had spent the previous 6 months working temporary office jobs while raising his son, Milo, alone. Calder had once worked as an operations coordinator for a small logistics company, but when the business collapsed, so did the stability of his little family. His wife had left years earlier, and Calder had learned to become everything Milo needed: father, cook, homework helper, nurse, driver, and the person who checked under the bed whenever his son was afraid. He was not ashamed of any of it. What embarrassed him was needing another chance. That morning, before leaving for the interview, Milo had hugged him tightly and slipped a drawing into his hand. It showed 2 people standing beneath a crooked blue umbrella. Underneath, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Dad and me. Always together." Calder had smiled and promised his son that he would be home before dinner. He had no idea that keeping that promise would become one of the hardest things he had ever done. The CEO waiting for him was Serafina Vale, a 41-year-old woman whose name appeared regularly in business magazines. She had built Veyron Global from a struggling technology company into a multinational empire. Investors called her fearless. Competitors called her ruthless. Employees simply called her impossible. Serafina demanded perfection because she believed mistakes were expensive, and over the years, that belief had hardened into something colder. Her office was spotless, her schedule was divided into 5-minute blocks, and every employee entering her room seemed to hold their breath. She had fired secretaries for missing meetings, for mispronouncing names, for booking the wrong table, for being too slow, and sometimes for reasons no one understood. Calder listened carefully as she described the job and the brutal expectations attached to it. He didn't argue. He didn't promise miracles. He simply opened his folder and showed her a handwritten system he had created during his previous jobs. It organized appointments according to urgency, emotional importance, travel time, preparation requirements, and even recovery periods between difficult meetings. Serafina stared at the pages for several seconds. Then she asked why he had created such a detailed system for a job he had not even been offered. Calder smiled faintly and explained that when you are raising a child alone, you learn quickly that chaos does not disappear because you are tired. You learn to prepare before problems arrive. Something about that answer made her pause. She hired him that afternoon. The first week was a disaster. Serafina deliberately gave Calder impossible assignments because she expected him to fail. She moved meetings without warning, sent requests at midnight, demanded reports with almost no notice, and changed travel plans minutes before departure. Calder absorbed every challenge without complaining. When an investor's flight was delayed, he found another route before Serafina knew there was a problem. When an important client arrived early, he rearranged the entire morning without canceling a junior employee's presentation. When Serafina forgot about a charity event she had agreed to attend, Calder quietly placed the invitation in front of her and reminded her that the organization depended on her appearance. She frowned and asked how he remembered something she had forgotten. Calder simply said that important things should not be allowed to disappear just because life becomes busy. Then came the night that changed everything. Serafina had a major international presentation scheduled for the following morning. Her entire executive team was working late when the company's central presentation system suddenly crashed. Hours of preparation disappeared. Panic spread through the office. People began blaming the technology department, the internet connection, and each other. Serafina stood in the middle of the conference room staring at the blank screens, and for the first time in years, she looked genuinely lost. Calder did not panic. He asked everyone to stop talking for 60 seconds. He gathered the latest printed materials, contacted the backup team, reconstructed the most important numbers from emails, and reorganized the presentation into a simpler format that could work without the missing system. He stayed until almost dawn. When Serafina finally asked why he was doing so much for a company that could replace him tomorrow, Calder answered that he had learned something as a father: sometimes people do their best work not because they are being watched, but because someone is depending on them. The presentation succeeded. Investors were impressed by Serafina's ability to remain composed during what they believed had been a technical problem that was handled brilliantly. Nobody knew Calder had rebuilt half the presentation overnight. Serafina knew. And for the first time, she began noticing the small details about the man sitting outside her office. She noticed that he never took lunch unless someone reminded him. She noticed that he checked the time at exactly 3:30 every afternoon. She eventually discovered why. That was when Milo's after-school program ended. Calder had been paying a neighbor to pick up his son because his new job demanded more hours than he had expected. He had never complained because he was terrified of losing the opportunity. One afternoon, Serafina found Calder sitting alone in an empty conference room, staring at his phone. There was a message from the school saying Milo had become sick and needed to be picked up. Calder was calculating how much leaving work might cost him. Serafina looked at his face and recognized something she had spent years refusing to see in others: fear. Not fear for himself, but fear of failing someone who depended on him. Instead of telling him to stay, she told him to go. Calder hesitated, expecting a trap. But Serafina simply told him that no job should require a parent to choose between earning a living and caring for a sick child. Calder left immediately. The next morning, Milo was sitting beside Calder in the lobby because the neighbor could not watch him that day. Serafina walked past them, stopped, and looked at the little boy. Milo nervously held up his drawing of the blue umbrella. Serafina asked what it meant. Milo explained that his father always said an umbrella was not supposed to stop the rain. It was supposed to help you stand through it. Serafina stood silently for a moment. She had spent years building walls around herself because she believed depending on anyone was weakness. Yet this child had just explained strength more clearly than most executives ever had. A few weeks later, the company faced its greatest crisis. A major contract was about to collapse because confidential figures had been leaked. Suspicion fell on several employees, and rumors spread quickly. Serafina became furious and ordered an internal investigation. Calder noticed something everyone else had missed. The leaked document had been accessed during a period when the office's digital security logs showed no unusual activity. That meant someone had copied the information earlier and waited. Calder compared meeting schedules, access records, travel times, and document revisions. He discovered that the leak had come from a senior executive who had been quietly preparing to leave the company and take clients with him. Calder presented the evidence to Serafina, not with triumph, but with caution. The betrayal devastated her. After the executive was removed, Serafina sat alone in her office long after everyone had gone home. Calder found her staring through the windows at the city below. She admitted that she had spent years believing people were problems that needed to be controlled. Every time someone disappointed her, she replaced them. 33 secretaries had come and gone because she had never stopped to ask why so many people were failing around her. Calder told her that sometimes when the same problem happens 33 times, the problem may not be 33 different people. Sometimes the problem is the system. Sometimes it is the person in charge. Those words stayed with Serafina. Over the following months, something remarkable happened. She changed. Meetings became less hostile. Employees were encouraged to speak honestly. Mistakes became opportunities to improve instead of reasons for humiliation. She even started remembering people's birthdays. Calder remained by her side, not because he was afraid of being fired, but because he had become someone she trusted completely. One Friday afternoon, Serafina called Calder into her office. He expected another crisis. Instead, she handed him an envelope. Inside was a promotion, a significant salary increase, and a new title, Executive Operations Director. Calder stared at the paper, speechless. Serafina told him that he had taught her the most important lesson of her career: leadership was not about finding perfect people. It was about helping good people become stronger. Then she added one more thing. She had arranged a scholarship fund for Milo's education through the company's community foundation, not as charity, but as recognition for the family that had unknowingly changed the culture of an entire company. Calder's eyes filled with tears. He thought about the little boy waiting at home, about the blue umbrella drawing, about the countless nights when he had wondered whether all his sacrifices would ever lead anywhere. He realized that sometimes the door you are desperately trying to open is not the door you are meant to walk through. Sometimes you are meant to walk into a place and change what is behind it. Years later, employees at Veyron Global still told the story of the CEO who fired 33 secretaries. But they told another part too. They remembered the single father who walked into her office carrying a worn folder and the quiet confidence of a man who had survived difficult days without becoming cruel. He had not simply become her secretary. He had become the person who reminded her that behind every resume was a human being, behind every mistake was a lesson, and behind every struggling employee might be a story worth understanding. And every afternoon, when Calder returned home, Milo would run to the door and throw his arms around him. The blue umbrella drawing eventually became framed and hung above Calder's desk. Underneath it was a small handwritten sentence that Calder never allowed anyone to remove: "We stand through the rain together." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Hard Working Dad, and leave a comment so this message of kindness and second chances can reach someone who needs it today. And here is a special request: comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe people can change when someone finally chooses to understand them instead of giving up on them. Because sometimes the person everyone has already rejected is not the problem. Sometimes they are the person who has been waiting for someone brave enough to see their worth. And sometimes, the greatest transformation begins with one exhausted single dad walking into a room where 33 people had failed and simply saying, "I'm the last secretary you'll need."